working for an employer, preferably as few as possible, for 40 years, save as much money as humanly possible. And then, when you're 65, 70 years old, then decide to live your life, retire and start doing the things that you've always wanted to do. That just never made sense to me.
Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast, and I'd like to welcome Josh Beauvais to our show. Josh spent 17 years in corporate America in the commercial banking industry as Chief Credit Officer of a privately held commercial lender until 2022. Deciding that a change was due, he bought a landscaping business and started a self-storage investment company. Josh, I'm so glad you're on the show. So let's get started.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Share with us your superhero backstory.
Yeah, I think it's important to go all the way back just to give a very brief kind of summary of where I came from. I grew up in a rather blue collar household that both my parents were W-2 workers. They had the typical societal idea of work and retirement. And their ideas and beliefs were passed down to me, which were be lucky that an employer gives you a job, work as hard as possible for that employer, don't rock the boat. But then in addition to that, it's working for an employer, preferably as few as possible, for 40 years, save as much money as humanly possible. And then when you're 65, 70 years old, then decide to live your life, retire and start doing the things that you've always wanted to do. That just never made sense to me. From a very young age, I just knew that there had to be a better way. But through parents and schools and society, that message was just pounded into my head just day after day after day in some fashion or another, that eventually I feel like I just gave up. And I just started down that path that everybody told me was the only path to take to get to retirement and to get to a point, honestly, to be able to live your life. And so I went to college, when I got my master's degree. And then after my master's degree is when I started in corporate commercial banking. And everything was fine for a while, but it was right around probably 2013 that I became just disillusioned with the whole corporate America path. And I knew back then that something had to change, but I didn't know what to change. I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know where to start. Long story short, I ended up falling into a pretty intense addiction for about 3 years. And I think some of that was just because I was stuck and I just needed an escape. I didn't know where to go, didn't know what to do, like I said. And so from about 2013, 14, and 15, I fell into the addiction, got sober in 2015. All of a sudden I was sober, but I still had this feeling of desperation of, this path doesn't make sense to me. Which made it worse because I didn't have the escape any longer. And so I had slowly started working on educating myself in different investment strategies, different asset classes, different ways to earn income. But that was a slow process for me. It wasn't until 2020, at the very beginning of 2021, that I hired my first mindset coach and worked with her for a while, and then joined Emerge through GoBundance. And really everything took off from there. Joining Emerge for me was like all of a sudden finding people who thought like me, where in corporate America, whenever I would have these ideas or these beliefs that there was something better out there, people would kind of look at me with blank stares. They're like, what are you talking about? This is all we know. We don't know how to do anything else. So really everything took off for me after joining Emerge, surrounding myself with other like-minded people. But then just to back up a little bit, along this timeline that I just laid out for everybody, I got married to my wife, Chrissy, in 2011. We had our first daughter in November of 2014, had our second daughter in October of 2016.
Love your story. You had your kids right at the height of your addiction as well. I mean, everybody, when they look at addiction, usually, like you said, it's to escape what's going on around you. And is there anything from that that you took away that you learned in that time frame?
Yeah, our first daughter was really born towards the end of it. Things had started slowing down. I started becoming honest with my wife and my friends before my daughter was born, and so the official end date to that period in my life wasn't until 2015. But prior to my daughter being born, um, did start to become the end of it. So one thing that I learned throughout that process is that I knew there had to be a better way to live. That topic ended up becoming up over and over and over again in my life, whether it's addiction, whether it's corporate America, whether it's, my mindset on money, my mindset on freedom, on time freedom. I've been faced with a series of situations where I just kind of sat there and I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this.
Yeah. I think that's very common with a lot of people. I mean, I can relate to you as well back in the, I would say decade, 15 years ago. I mean, I was in the same spot. I'm going through, I was a mom I raised my kids and my husband went to work. And there were days where you just sit there and go, there's got to be more to life than this. There's got to be more. And your story about your parents instilling in you, get a good job, stay at it for 30 years, and then you can have a life afterwards. My parents were the same way. They're like, go be a teacher. It's stable. You'll always have a job. You'll retire with a pension. Go do that. You're right. There's more to life than that. There has to be more to it than that.
I mean, along this topic, some of the other kind of details to the lessons that I learned growing up is I needed to search for a job that paid the most amount of money possible. And then, secondly, when I was about 14, when job openings were still in the newspaper classifieds, my father one day said that I needed to get a job, in that I'd need to start looking for one. He told me how to look for one in the classifieds. And so he said, just go and circle all of them and then start making calls on Monday. And so I circled a whole bunch of jobs that excited me, and I left the newspaper on the table, I think it was. And when he checked to see if I had been looking for jobs, he brought the newspaper to me and kind of scolded me. It was very judgmental. He was like, you just circled all the jobs that had some word of like excitement or fun or something like that included in the advertisement. And I looked at him and I'm like, yeah, what's wrong with that? And like it was a whole thing that I was essentially judged and looked down upon because I wanted the way I earned money to be fun. That was a lesson that I learned that day. I don't know that he even remembers it, or if he realizes it, but it's like from that day forward, I realized that whichever way I make money, it can't be fun. It's got to be grueling. In addition to that, it's just seeing my parents, the way they earned money and the jobs that they held. They would always constantly come home from work and complain about their work and complain about how many hours they worked and what they don't like what they're doing and how they want to switch companies, but they never switched. So it's like all these lessons in me were ingrained in that, like, I need to earn as much money as possible. That is focus number one. And then just completely throw out the window the concept of having fun while I'm earning a living.
So, at what point did you realize that, wait a minute, these limiting beliefs that I had from my teenage years are no longer serving me and I can create a life that is fun? So, at some point, was there a trigger that happened for you or was it gradual? Talk a little bit about that around that.
I think I had always so I've worked nonstop since I was 14, and at all of my jobs, I have tried to infuse fun into the jobs that I work. I worked at McDonald's from the time I was 14 to 18 or 19, and I made sure that was fun because the work sucked. Yeah, but and actually, I'm still friends with some people that I worked with back then. After that, I went to a moving company and a bricklaying company, landscaping company, and then my corporate American jobs. But I constantly made sure that we were having fun while we were working, which I found caused people to work harder, caused people to be more interested in their work. And so just through kind of these lessons that I was taught versus the evidence that I saw in person while people were actually enjoying their work told me that there had to be a better way, to go about work. It didn't have to be grueling. It didn't have to be something that you went to every day and resented your employer, resented your company, all that kind of stuff. But when I entered into corporate America and the prospects of having to support a family, getting more serious jobs, I feel like those lessons came back. It was like all these insecurities came into my head, and me constantly worrying about me doing a good job, or if I'm working hard enough, or this or that, or does this person accept my work, does this person like me, all this kind of stuff. The monkey mind just started flaring up when things started becoming serious and I had more responsibilities and obligations. The turning point for me was, it was just, I was driving myself crazy. It was just all the stress going on that I think it manifested itself in my addiction. I think that's what I went to. But then coming out of my addiction, that's when I started, saying that this path didn't make sense any longer. And I needed to begin to figure something else out.
It seems like from your earlier years when you didn't have the responsibilities and you had to do these jobs like McDonald's, and your spirit wasn't entirely crushed from that day when you circled those jobs you wanted to and your dad didn't approve with them. You still had that thread in you to make a job fun, but didn't make the connection that, oh, wait a minute, I can create a life for me that is going to be sustaining and I'm going to enjoy what I did. It's just an aside note to parents or anybody in general out there. Do you hear what Josh is saying? I want to capture this because our words matter. What we say to people matters. How we treat our kids shapes them. And if we are not in check of our own thoughts and opinions, I mean, look at how devastating to a point that it was for you because your dad didn't approve. You knew what you wanted to do. It turned out to be disapproval. And I would say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that having that limiting belief is what probably propelled you into addiction.
That lesson that day was a series of other lessons along the same vein. I will admit I was a very difficult kid.
We all are. We're all difficult in our own ways. you know?
My parents had a very difficult time with me, but it's because I was more independent, more type A, more I needed things to be done my way, and there was a constant power struggle in the house.
Yeah, I was the same thing. Yeah, I'm the same way. I think everybody should give their kids a disc profile and then just raise them off the disc profile. I was the same way. I'm a very dominant person. I am a very outspoken person, but my most of my life and my family life pretty much said, "Nope, be quiet. Sit in the back. Live in obscurity. You're just, just go with the flow and be quiet." When you know you can be so much more and you don't have that support, especially at a younger age, it does make life a lot more difficult. I want to go back a minute and ask you, what are some ways that you made your jobs fun? That people loved, that they wanted to I'm just curious, how do you make McDonald's fun?
I mean, so I was 14 at the time, so it was very childish.
I started working
It
at
was
14 too, and I sent all my kids to work at 14 because you could.
it was like doing stupid stuff, like if somebody was, packing the fries into the fry containers, and they're right next to the hot grease, you throw a piece of ice in the hot grease, and, and the and the grease bubbles over and it splatters, and it's not enough to hurt somebody, but it's enough so that somebody notices, and then notices you, that did something, and then they, so it's kind of like razzing people. Or um we used to have, this is going to sound so dumb, we used to have messy kitchen Sundays, where we just we just made a complete mess out of the kitchen. But while we were working, for kids, for like 14, 15, 16 year olds, that was like a cool thing because it was against the rules. I'm not saying messy in a like a way that would get people sick or something like that from eating the food. It's like just not cleaning the floor properly type thing. But then at like the moving company, it was positioning boxes in the truck so that when somebody pulled a certain box, like they'd get a whole bunch of stuff that fell on them, like just stupid stuff like that. Nothing where anybody got hurt, nobody got sick, nothing like that. Just you just find creative ways to mess with the other person, and they mess with you back, and it adds an element of fun that in my mind, when you infuse the work environment with stuff like that, I feel like the working environment, or the fun that you have, kind of transcends the actual work that you're doing. So people are thinking about enjoying themselves, but also the camaraderie with their coworkers, rather than just the grueling work, like landscaping and lawn care. That can be grueling if you're just in your head. If all you're thinking about is bills you have to pay, and the lawn that you have to cut, and the job that you have in front of you that's going to take 6 hours or whatever. If you're stuck there, I could absolutely see people getting burned out and stressed out. But if there's a bit of you know razzing, or just playful type things that you infuse into the workday, I think you can cause the work day to become less grueling and more enjoyable.
I think that's some great advice for anybody. If you're stuck in something that you're doing 8 hours a day and there's no enjoyment out of it, to look for those fun things. So that's a small step people can take. So let's switch a little bit. What made you decide to buy a lawn business coming from commercial banking? Because obviously there are two different industries there. Talk about the struggles, your transition from W-2 to entrepreneur.
This really has been about a 10-year process for me, just knowing that something had to change, falling into addiction, coming out of it. And then once I got out of it, becoming more of sound mind, just coming up with more of a plan of, I need to start learning, I need to educate myself, I need to start moving on from, just this W-2 type thinking. In 2016 was really climbing up the corporate ladder. I was near the top, and my boss at that time was, I don't know, number two in the company, and I was in line to eventually take over for him once he retired. And I kind of looked around, and I was like, this is what I've been working for. This doesn't, I don't want this guy's job. I mean, I loved that guy. I still do. I still talk to him. But I did not want his job. I did not want to deal with all the BS that he had to deal with. That caused me, like I said, to continue my education, and stomached that job for a while. And in 2020, June 30th, 2020, I decided to leave that company. And I thought, might as well try to go over to another company to see if things are different, see if things are a little bit more palatable. And when I switched over to that new company, it was fine for a while. But what I realized is that I wasn't helping myself. I was actually hurting myself, because what I had done is I created like a honeymoon type phase just with the new company. And everything was fine for a while, and I enjoyed it, but then, nothing against that employer, just from my own mindset type standpoint, my my concerns about my longevity in the W-2 job resurfaced, and all of a sudden I became dissatisfied with just normal corporate America antics. I was at that employer for about 2.5 years, and I think that I had, through joining a merge, through getting myself around other like-minded people, and me starting to think differently, I think I started acting differently in the W. Actually, I'm sure I started acting differently, and they made the decision for me. They let me go October 13th of 2022, which I view as something that happened for me, not to me. Um,
They did you a favor.
they
Yeah,
did.
they did you a favor.
I had, prior to that date, I had been looking for a new job, and just time, and I was still stuck in that thought process that a new job would fix it. And I was being coached by Jamie Gruber, who I think you had on the podcast. I was being coached by him for a year, and I went through this thought process with him, and he's the one that introduced me to the idea of the honeymoon phase. He was like, "I don't think you should get another job. It's just going to restart this process and delay your growth further by getting a new job, because you're going to get distracted by that honeymoon phase." Intuitively, I knew he was right, but as I thought through it, I'm like, no, screw that. I'm going to go get another job. It's going to be better. It's going to be this. I had all these expectations for it.
You know what? Why did you go get the other job though? Was it for security? Was it just for familiarity, or were you just genuinely convinced that okay, that last job really wasn't a good fit, and I can find what I'm looking for at the next one?
Well, Jamie told me to get the new job while I was at the one most recently where I was let go. The bank that I worked at before that, the reason I left that job is because they had gone through an acquisition in 2018. They were acquired by a larger bank, and things just absolutely exploded from a corporate, you know, um, corporate America type antic type thing. Leading up to me being let go of my most recent employer, there were 3 or 4 different situations where I was interviewing for jobs. Everything was going great. I knew for certain in my head that I was going to get those jobs. Chance happened, and I did not get those jobs. And so I think something was working on my behalf to make sure that I did not get those jobs, and that I was able to go through the situation that I went through in October of being let go from my most recent employer. But along with looking for those jobs, I was actively looking for business acquisitions. The lawn company, or the landscaping company, I had found maybe at the end of September of 2022. And I was already in negotiations with the seller at the time that I was let go. And so I was let go from my company in October, or I'm sorry, on October 13th, 2022. And then by October 17th, I had the landscaping company under contract. So just 4 days later, it just all came together.
Wow. Cool. You know what? Jamie talks about that when I was interviewing him. We went into the weeds that like the days that surrounded him leaving his W-2, but the one thing that he talked about was that once he left the W-2, it was like his life exploded and these things started dropping in that he didn't imagine. And you know what? Even if the circumstances surrounding your job, they did you a favor, you know, without realizing it, they did you a favor. And if you, I mean, at least this is what I'm seeing from my vantage point. You, most of your life, you have an entrepreneurial spirit and you know you have it. And that's where the creativity, you know, entrepreneurs are creative. So that's where the creativity is coming in. That's where the fun is coming in. That's where the loyalty comes in at. That's why your inner being wants to create and be in just be in control of something, being in control of your life, of your job, of what's going on around you. And when we are in these W-2 positions, if they don't allow us to operate in that entrepreneurial spirit, that's where being trapped comes in. That's where being very disillusioned comes in. That's where being depressed comes in, where you want to be so much more, but you're in this W-2, you're stuck there and you can't be who you want to be. And you talked about being part of Emerge and how the people that you surrounded yourself with really supported you. And actually, I was part of Emerge. I just joined Emerge October. I think I joined it October 10th or October 5th, right at that same time last year in October 2022. And if I remember correctly, I remember the Facebook post that you posted about acquiring the business that you did. And being new to Emerge, the one thing I remembered about it was how everybody in there completely supported you. They were like all over you. And for me, that was my first experience in an environment where people supported people. My previous experiences weren't like that. I was a teacher. I went back into teaching 2015 and I couldn't get a full-time contracted position. And at the end of the day, I don't play well with others. I say that because entrepreneurs or people who beat to their own drum, when you are put into a setting where you have to conform, but you don't conform to others, and there's that friction there, then people pick up on that and they recognize that. And what society sees as a negative is actually a positive, but we just don't support it. So you made this transition and now you are where you are today. Are you finding that you are more aligned today with your authentic self, and talk about how that's changing you?
Yeah, I'm definitely more aligned today. It's silly things like I'm using my phone differently. I've always had corporate software on my phone for email, and I always had this like paranoia in my head that they're watching my search history and whatever. And if like I was looking for a new job, or if I was looking for at another company or something like that, or if I'm looking at a business acquisition, like I always had this thing in the back of my head, like, are they going to see this? Something that is silly. I've always liked tattoos, and being in corporate America, I was like, oh, I can't get them. I'd be fired if I had them, and if somebody saw them or whatever, especially being in a C-level position. And then after I was let go, I'm like, well, I can get them now. And so I got a few. So it's like those are very small examples, but it's like it. But I don't think people realize how insidious this kind of thing could be when you feel like you want to live a certain way, whichever in whichever sense of that concept that you're thinking that there could be another way that you could live, but you don't because of a company that you work for. I mean, just step back and think about that. Is it your life or is it your company's life? Because if you're not living a certain way, if you're not doing certain things because of what a company will think about you, it's like, is that really bringing you true happiness? Those are some of the smaller things, but in acquiring the landscaping company, it's like I can breathe now because I can make this into whatever I want. I absolutely have to listen to and work with the employees and make sure that they're happy. So I've got, accountability to them. But I'm not worried about that because I know that how I feel that I should run a business and how I would naturally run a business will be in line with what the employees want. I know that I'm fair. I know that I'm honest. I know that I'm going to make it fun for them. I know that we're going to get along great, that they're going to be able to trust me. And just allowing myself to finally step into a position of business ownership. I mean, that's moving into my authentic self. This is really all I've ever wanted, to be honest.
So I'm curious, did you have any business background knowledge prior to doing this?
Yeah, in my commercial banking experience, I was a portfolio manager for a while, maybe 6 years, and so portfolio managers have a portfolio of 10 to, I think at the most I had like 42 clients. and they're all businesses. They all range from candy manufacturers to aerospace manufacturing, and everything in between. And so I had managed a lot of different types of businesses, and so I learned a lot of lessons on how to run a business, how not to run a business. I also learned nuances of very different industries. But in addition to managing those portfolios on the underwriting side, I saw acquisition financing, how people acquire businesses from others, and how the financing of those acquisitions work through the commercial banking product that we had. So I had a lot of experience from commercial banking on the financing aspect, the managing aspect, the acquisition aspect, but then also from a financial statement analysis standpoint, and really knowing if a business is efficient and profitable and being run the right way. So when I started looking into business acquisition, it felt very natural. It felt comfortable, which gave me a sense of relief in that whole process.
Yeah, so that sounds like you were just able to naturally move into it because you already had that experience behind you. Was there something in acquiring this business that was unexpected for you? And how are you, or how did you deal with that?
What was unexpected, and this is going to be a very good thing, but what was unexpected was how fabulous the seller is. He is an amazing guy that is helping me in ways that I wouldn't expect a seller to help me. When I was going through my due diligence, nothing really came up as far as red flags goes. He ran everything above board. He's a fair and honest guy, great with the employees, great with the customers. Coming from the commercial banking side, you see all these horror stories of acquisitions going bad, and the seller, just kind of like washing their hands of the situation and walking away, or the seller staying on for some predetermined time, but then a dispute occurs, and all of a sudden the seller is exited from the business. I went into this kind of concerned that I would experience some of these negative lessons that I've learned along the way, but this guy has been absolutely amazing. Just really quickly on my first conversation with the seller, so I found the deal on Biz Buy Sell, and they had just some very brief financial numbers on the the face of the website, just to show a little teaser of the financial or financials of the business. And I realized that it was an extremely high margin business. So I set up a call with the broker and the seller, and the seller just basically said, tell me who you are, what brings us together, type thing. And I go into my corporate America story about me being disillusioned with corporate America and blah 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 blah. And as I say the word disillusioned, his I saw his eyes perk up, and I didn't know what to make of that. And I stopped talking, and he's like, "Wow," he's like, "You only waited 17 years to exit corporate America. Unfortunately, I waited 30." And
Wow.
he
So he understood where you were coming from.
he was an old advertising guy, not old, but long term advertising guy that ended up leaving advertising after 30 years to find something different and basically do the same exact thing that I did. And then he found this company, bought it, and has done a wonderful job of running it. But our stories synced up, so I think within that first phone call, he knew that he was going to sell to me.
Wow, what a blessing that was. And what a I don't believe in coincidences. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like a coincidence to me. That sounds like a divine intervention appointment there. And even I can tell through your story, like listening from when you were talking about working for corporate America to what you're doing now, there's an inflection in your voice from a heaviness talking about corporate America to a lightness and a sense of peace when you're talking about what you do now. So now that you're in the job and now you're doing something that aligns with who you are authentically, What are some areas outside business that have been positively impacted by you changing your career and now doing something that you want to do?
I will start with there's actually a few different ways. I'll start with my family though. Getting my wife and I on board with our next steps. We were trying to figure out ways just to wait it out, just to work our W-2s and save as much money as possible and retire at some point. But now it's like we're doing a lot of other things. Like, I started a self storage acquisition company and started helping people coach people out of corporate America, which is entertaining and fun for me. But in addition to getting my wife and I on board, it's talking to my daughters about the change and why I'm changing and what that could mean for them. And now that I'm living, the way I've been thinking for so long, that I'm telling them that they can do whatever they want so long as they enjoy it. One lesson that I have had to reverse in my head is that money is the number one thing, because what I have found time and time again is when I chase money, unhappiness comes. But when I chase purpose and lifestyle design and time freedom and all those other things, that's when the happiness comes. And coincidentally, because I'm more aligned, the money will come. And so I'm, they're just 8 and 6. So some of these concepts they wouldn't quite be able to grasp yet. But I'm trying to phrase these lessons in ways that they would understand, to let them know that they can do other things. They can start a company right now if they want to. Our 8-year-old, she definitely does think a lot like me, and she has started to think of businesses to run, and she's got a YouTube channel. And
That's awesome.
so with the family piece, that's been the most impacted by all this, and we're just trying to show our daughters that they don't have to go down the same path that we started on.
Wow. Yeah, because think about how you were influenced at 14. And kids, we forget that they are so impressionable at those younger ages between birth and really 14, 15, 16. That whole time frame that is just so critical on how we impress upon them, what we think about them, what our beliefs are, how we view life. And I'm excited for your girls. So now that because you have that entrepreneurial spirit, sounds like one of them does at least. That's the second child syndrome. I have one of those kids too. It's awesome to watch them just be completely different than everybody else. And it's all beautiful because everybody is just different in their own way. And what else was there besides the impact on your family from making this change?
So, as part of being in recovery, I run a recovery meeting on Monday nights around Metro Detroit, through sponsorship of other addicts and alcoholics, but then also just the energy and message that I bring to the recovery meetings has changed. The message that I'm bringing more now to the people in those meetings is more about like hope and living the life, that you desire, and getting out of, stuck patterns and stuff like that. Whereas before it was like more along the lines of like victim mentality. And then going forward, it was more of like, me being intentional and me being in control of not just my life, but my family's lives in the direction that we're going. So that's been a big change that I've noticed recently.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm sure, you don't realize how many people's lives you touched sometimes. I mean, I was listening to a story about someone whose father was an alcoholic, and he was saying that there was somebody out there who took the time to believe in his dad. His dad got sober and then in turn changed the trajectory of his life. And sometimes we don't realize how far reaching our our actions can be, and when we seek to serve out of who we were really does have an impact on people. You are most qualified to help the person you used to be and giving back. I'm sure that fills your heart to be able to do that. If you could go back to your younger self and deliver a message, what would you tell your younger self?
I would tell myself a few things. One, Be authentic to yourself. Don't care so much about what other people think. That's one thing that could have made a major difference for me. The other thing is I have an issue with overthinking, and ruminating about things. And so what I have observed now, and it's only since being able to get some space for my W-2, um, is that action beats thinking for me. If I can replace thinking and ruminating with evidence, that is a surefire way for me to be able to get on from an issue and begin resolving it. Because if, in the absence of evidence, I'm just, for me, my own process, I'm left with thinking. And thinking, all of a sudden, my thoughts become reality rather than evidence becoming reality. And it just keeps me stuck. So, one thing that I know right now, and that I wish my younger self knew, is that action beats thinking.
So that's along the line of ready, fire, aim.
I was thinking about that this morning. Yeah. That's the concept.
Did you read that book?
I did. That's a concept that I was first introduced to in Emerge, and it was when I was still just over my head in W-2 thinking. I was like, what are you talking about? You can't do that. At this point in 2023, I've worked with, I think, 5 or 6 mindset coaches at this point. And so there's been a lot of work on breaking down these thoughts and moving on from them. But when I was first introduced to that concept, I couldn't believe that people operated that way. But what I realize now is that I need to operate that way, or else I'm stuck in thinking. And that's very powerful.
What aspect now, ready, fire, aim can sound very scary to some people because and I know I can relate to you because I'm a lot like that too. I want to think through, I want to know where I'm going, I want to look in the pool before I jump in there. What fears did you have to work through in order to overcome and just do that ready, fire, aim as opposed to ready, ready, aim, fire?
It's actually interesting because it's the fears held me back from entertaining the concept of ready, fire, aim. But what I realized is that only once I truly understood myself did I realize that ready, fire, aim made sense for myself. So it's not necessarily that I had to get over fears. It's just I had to have a better understanding of me and my process. I was just comfortable, and I just took it as my normal process, if you will, to just think and think and think and think and then get stuck in thinking. It had been happening for so long that I just thought that that's the way I did things. I didn't know that there was a better way.
Did coaching help you get out of that mindset?
Yeah, coaching did, but then also just moving into action and just realizing that I can only do so much studying and educating where I get to a certain point of understanding a topic. When I move into action, that's when I can become an expert in the topic or move on to, being much more proficient. For me, it's almost like education takes me up to a low ceiling, but then action, I mean, allows me to go well beyond that.
Yeah, that's some really good advice to just, you get to a point where you're right. You can educate, 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 read, 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 read. But at some point, you're going to have to jump. And that may seem scarier to others. And
One thing that I would add to this, and I challenge people to think through if they're curious about a topic like an investment strategy, business acquisition, whatever it may be, and they move to education. If they're anything like me and they've bought 15 courses over, to learn certain things, but they don't feel like they know enough, and so that they buy more and more and more courses. Is that an avoidance technique, or are they truly educating themselves? Because for me, it was just avoidance of action, and that came from fear. So I'd be curious to challenge people to question themselves if the idea of education is really avoidance, or if they're truly educating themselves.
when you got ready and you jumped, I'm sure there were things that you didn't expect, but the helpful component for you is that and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you had a community around you as well.
As far as reaching out to the Emerge community, one thing I thought of earlier that I still want to mention is that when I posted in the Emerge community that I was let go from my job, a ton of people responded. And it wasn't that people were responding by saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Are you okay? Do you need somebody to talk to? Whatever." It was more people reaching out saying, "Congratulations." It was like it's. I wouldn't have expected anything else from them intuitively, but with my thinking mind, I was surprised. I was shocked at the love that I felt and the encouragement that I felt from everybody. It was a vastly different response that I got from them than I did from family and friends. They were all the ones that were asking if I was okay, if I wanted to go out to eat with them, if I wanted to do whatever, to talk through things. There were no congratulations on the outside. There were only congratulations on the inside in Emerge, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It shows the difference in how people think and view certain situations. If you have a small view of things or you have a traditional view of an experience happening. So, for example, your family and friends, they're in a box. Oh my goodness, you lost your job. It's the end of the world. What are you going to do now? You don't have that comfortable W-2. And they're operating from their belief system, and that's all they know, and that's all that's their paradigm, their way of thinking, versus when you come into a community that thinks 180 degrees different than that, and there's many people that have gone ahead of you and said, "Oh wow, congratulations, it's great, now you can start the next chapter of your life and be in your authentic self and feed into and be able to grow and blossom and do all these things." So you picked up on something that's very, I'm not sure a lot of people would notice, because we get so stuck in our habits. We get so stuck in what's out there in the world and realize, wait a minute, there's other people out there that have different viewpoints and different ways of thinking. Like, how did it make you feel when you got the, oh my goodness, from your families, I'm so sorry to hear this, versus the congratulations from the Emerge group?
It was so with the family and friends and everybody saying, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." It was kind of brought me back into victim mentality. But then when I heard all of the responses from people in Emerge, it was empowering. It's like, the reason that they were saying congratulations is because first they've known what I had wanted for so long, and what I wanted was to move on from the the W-2 job. It set me on a course of intention, and it was just very empowering. It felt good to get all those responses from all those people in Emerge.
Was your response to, or how you viewed your responses to Emerge, did that eventually bubble over to your family side? Did anybody get to see that side where they kind of stepped back and said, "Wait a minute, Josh, you should be upset, or you should be worried."
One conversation I had with my father was I I don't know, a month and a half, maybe 2 months after I was let go. He was asking me how things were going, and he was thinking that the sky was falling since I lost my job, and I had been preparing for this mindset wise, but then also financially. So we had a decent runway to weather the storm. I saw the writing on the wall, so I stopped all 401k contributions, saved all my bonuses, saved X percentage of each paycheck to really prepare for this. And I explained that to him. I said, we're fine. But then he asked me to look for another banking job. And I was like, first of all, that's weird that you're asking me at 43 years old to look for a job. But then I explained to him that I'm not going back, that I'm moving on from this part of my life and I'm doing something different. And I asked him, nicely to just, leave this topic alone because I'm not doing it. And at the end of the conversation, when we were about to hang up, he just paused and he was like, "Josh, just do me one favor and just will you reach out to some recruiters and look for a banking job?" I just said no. And I said, "Okay, I got to go." and that's the last we've talked about it. It is what it
Yeah, it happens. Yeah, it is what it is. It's good that you can laugh it off. What are some daily habits that you do that help you achieve, the life that you have?
a lot of things I do today, I have done for a long time, like go to the gym at 5 a.m. That's a non-negotiable thing. I don't feel right if I don't go to the gym first thing in the morning. The other thing I've layered on is a miracle morning. So meditating, affirmations, visualization, exercise, journaling, and then reading. Whenever I do that routine, my my mind is set for the day. I'm centered, especially the journaling part. That's one habit that I'll kind of set aside from everything else to say that that's been a big improvement and game changer for me is just journaling about anything and everything that's bothering me that's coming up on the horizon. It's just something about getting my thoughts out of my head and onto a piece of paper allows me to process things at 10 times the speed as normal. It's That's a game changer for me.
I do the miracle morning as well. I find that Monday through Friday looks different to me than Saturday and Sunday, and I think have some grace for ourselves.
Yeah, I think for so long I had thought from a all or nothing type standpoint, and I'm not great at this. But what I do realize is that, to your point, there needs to be some grace. You need to allow yourself some leeway, but also it's about progress, not perfection. And progress, not perfection, is it's not just a an everyday term. It's something that is talked about uh, religiously in recovery meetings. It's like so long as you're doing something to better yourself, who cares if it's not the whole thing? If you only get to S, A, and V, guess what? You did S, A, and V. So don't judge yourself because you only got to that point. Or if at the gym, if I am sick or if I wake up late or whatever and I can't get a full workout in, my old self will say, "Oh, screw it, the day's ruined. I'm not going to go." Now it's like if I only have 20 minutes to actually spend at the gym, I'm going to spend 20 minutes at the gym. It's better going than having everything perfect, or me just saying screw it and all of a sudden the day is ruined because I couldn't get my full workout in.
Yeah, that's a good mind shift there, where you go from the all or nothing and to giving ourselves some grace. I think it that tends to be a trait of perfectionists because I'm like that, it's either all or nothing. And I used to think, like you said earlier, black and white. I see things in black and white. And you know what? It's okay. And it's a skill too. It's hard to learn to be okay in the gray area and that you can flourish in the gray area too. It doesn't always have to be black and white. Uh, but to know that there's other things that, you can operate in other areas as well. As we wrap up, is there anything that you want to talk about that maybe we didn't get to or I didn't ask?
I've partnered up with my partner Steve Haig, self storage investment company that's called Elevation Equity Investments. We specialize in acquisition of self storage facilities across the country, generally in excess of 20,000 square feet. We look for value add type properties and also properties that may have some additional land attached to the property. But then also we briefly touched on the corporate America escape coaching business I just started. It's very very new. It's called Purpose Pivot. I think I'm most excited from because it comes from my own pain, and it brings me purpose and dare I say pleasure because it's moving people from the old W-2 type limited scarcity type thinking into a completely new way of thinking that so, quite frankly society and schools and families don't teach all the time.
That's exciting. Like we said before, you're most qualified to reach the person you used to be. And it sounds like Purpose Pivot is going to help others Josh, I want to thank you. We have unpacked so much stuff. Thank you for being transparent and sharing with us your life and your struggles that go along with it. Um, Before we close, how can people reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, also LinkedIn, Instagram, but my email address, if anybody wants to reach out, is josh@investwithelevation.com. That's the self-storage investment company email address.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of my podcast. If you like listening to Josh's story, then check out the episode right after this one to hear what small steps Josh suggests you can take. And as always, I would love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out if you have any comments or suggestions. And if you enjoyed what you heard, please take a moment to leave a review on whatever platform you listen to. I would appreciate it, and it would help my podcast to grow. If you got any value or you think someone else can benefit from what you heard, please spread the word, hit subscribe, and check out my website at www.suesaller.com. Remember, life doesn't get better by chance, it gets better by choice. Take small steps and make today awesome, friends. Thanks for listening.